I think that's right. Matthew Hulbert is a Lib Dem activist, is with me this morning. Hello, Matthew. How are you doing?
Very good to be with you, Peter.
And Jack Rowlett is a political commentator as well. Great to see you, Jack. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning.
Votes at 16. What do you think?
Well, I'm against, firmly against, actually. I think we need to have...
How old are you?
Well, I'm 23.
Okay.
I must say, when I was 16, I was strongly in favour of votes at 16. But I think as I've got older, I've realised I think it's important to have a set point when you become an adult. We say that that's 18. And I think it's important that voting is aligned with that. And I think we've got there's this creeping sense at the moment of adding all these sort of new different ages for things, whether that's the smoking ban that we've seen recently, whether that's the...
Although it's fallen away with all of
yeah,
these bits of legislation.
Thankfully, yes.
Well, I think Labour may well do it. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but that's another issue.
Yeah, but whether it's that or, the talk we've had about phasing in driving licences so you can't carry passengers for your first year if you're under 25, I think it's really important that you have a set point when you say, right, the state recognises that you're a responsible individual, you are able to make your own decisions, and I think that voting ultimately is one of the most important decisions you can make, and that should be aligned with the point when you become an adult.
You mentioned that point. I want to come to Matthew in a second, but you mentioned that point just on carrying passengers in your car before 25. Are we sort of infantilising people with that, do you think? I mean, you can either drive or you can't. Why should there be a graduation within that? Although, when I was a restricted driver in Northern Ireland, I could only go at 45 miles an hour for the first year, much to the frustration of many people behind me, let me tell you.
Yeah, I think it's completely infantilising. I mean, it's ridiculous. You've got, people under 25 who work, or parents, how they're going to be able to carry their kids around. And I think it's also totally arbitrary because we know that lots of older drivers as well are very likely to cause accidents too. So it just feels like attacking the under 25s for no apparent reason. I think we've got to stop that infantilisation, and the way that you do that is by saying, right, okay, you're an adult at 18, you get all these rights, you can vote, you can drive, do everything, and you have that as the set point rather than all this unnecessary nuance.
Matthew Hulbert, votes at 16?
I've always been in favour of votes at 16. I think of my wonderful niece who is 16 and who's one of the most responsible, compassionate, decent, clever people I know, and I would absolutely trust her with the vote. There are other 16-year-olds, I guess I wouldn't, but then again, there are people at every age. I mean, I see some of the, I'll be honest now and frank, I see some of the vox pops on the TV of voters, and I think with some of them, how do they have the vote?
And their vote is worth exactly the same as yours
Indeed.
Or mine. Well, it's interesting. I mean, there will be people who vote for Keir Starmer because they like his hair. There will be people who vote for Rishi Sunak because they're sorry for him being soaked in the rain. There are people who don't engage with politics in the way that most viewers and listeners of Talk do, because they're interested in politics and interested in what goes on in the world around them, and not everybody is like that. But nonetheless, 16-year-olds, I mean, why not, if you're saying 16-year-olds, why not 12-year-olds?
But I personally think 16 marks a change. I guess 18 marks a bigger change. I accept that. But I think 16 marks a significant change in a young person's life. Can I just say, I would also reform the Lords, and I would also introduce proportional representation. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Big game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Ding. The bell has been rung, and Matthew has shoehorned that in. But yeah, Dave has been in touch and says, good morning, Peter. You can join the armed forces at 16, but you're still not classed as an adult until you're 18, says Dave in Aberdeen. So thank you for that. I have not served a minute in uniform, and maybe Dave has.
You'd look good in uniform, Peter.
No. Sharon says 16-year-olds to vote, so that means they'll be able to drink, drive and buy cigarettes. I don't think you can do any of that now, actually. 17 is driving, isn't it? Alcohol's 18, and cigarettes is up to 18 as well, although that may be changed. And be charged as they'll be classed as adults. Lots of people getting in touch. Amanda says, regarding 16-year-olds, of course Labour want the younger votes. The whole concept of left-wing wokeism is to brainwash the young and gullible for the votes concerning times ahead. My goodness. Joanna in Salisbury says, I had the 16-year-old vote question with my granddaughter, who's almost 16 years old. She thought it was ridiculous. She said she didn't know enough. With Labour leading teachers, they had a vote in class as to whom they would vote in. She was the only one voting Conservative. I told her, listen to the policies, choose the one she wanted, then weigh it up as it was likely or financially possible that would be done at all. That's where she came up with. So very, very interesting ones there. I will return to that. We have a few calls on that. I promise you we'll come back to that debate. But I want to talk now a little bit about one of Labour's major policies. An education chief, this is Rudolph, great name, Elliot Lockhart, who's the chief executive of the Independent Schools Association. He said many smaller private schools are already on a financial knife edge and will be out of business if Labour puts up the fees by 20%. That is a planned VAT tax raid, the Telegraph calls it, and there's the question about when this will actually happen. Matthew, what is your thought on VAT on private school fees, many of which, of course, are charitable institutions?
Well, indeed. Well, first of all, I think they shouldn't be charitable institutions. I mean, these are in effect businesses; they're companies. I don't see why they should be getting help from.
Well, some of them are non-profit institutions. They are. That is true.
But how in a sense are they charities? I just don't quite understand.
Nah, well, they were given charitable status. I don't know why, but you think they shouldn't have that?
I think they shouldn't have that. And I mean, if I had my way, there wouldn't be private schools. There wouldn't be this two-tier education system. Just like there shouldn't be a two-tier health system. Do you think
private schools should be abolished?
Well, I mean, if I could do that without it causing a whole load of people a whole load of issues, yeah, absolutely. If I was restarting the state again, I would absolutely abolish.
But they do exist. They're a fact of life.
Schools.
They're a fact of life. So, and there are a lot of people, including talk viewers and listeners, who often, I'm not talking about people who go to Winchester or Eton or Harrow or those kind of places spending 50, 60 grand. I'm talking about people who scrimp and save. I spoke to a few people a few weeks ago, actually, who do 2 or 3 jobs maybe to get their kids into private school because the local state school isn't good enough.
And I don't blame them for wanting the best for their children, of course. What I'm saying is that the state sector should be good enough that they don't have to choose
do that. But it isn't, and that's the point. Jack, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have a kind of distorted view of private schools. We often think of them as the types of places that cabinet ministers have gone to, rather than these smaller independent schools that parents, scrimp and save to send their kids to. And I think there has been a lot of talk about how this is Labour kind of attacking voters who are not going to vote for them anyway, but actually those aspirational kind of working class or middle class people who do scrimp and save to send their kids to these private schools, those are exactly the sort of people Labour are trying to win the support of at this election. So I think it could harm them. And also, if we think about it as well, we look at private schools, that's parents, taking their kids out of the state system so they're not a burden on the state system. And I think the state should encourage that, really, if parents want to.
Should you be given a tax break, do you think?
I think that's something we should explore. Wow. I think we should explore it for healthcare as well.
Okay, I'm going to take a call from Mike in Southsea in a minute. He's very patiently on the line on this exact issue on VAT to private schools. We'll do that in just a second, but we've got a break first. Stay with us here on Talk.
It's the politics of envy, and it stinks.
Do you send your kids to private school, or maybe you did previously?
Sorry, did I go to one?
Go to one, or send your children, or have you any connection, or is this just something that you feel strongly about?
It's something I feel strongly about, because education in this country, once they went into this comprehensive system, it went down the drain. I don't know if you remember, some years ago, Frederick Forsyth, the author, was on Question Time, and what he said was, if you want a good education in this country, you pay. Either you move to an area where there are good state schools, or you go private.
Well, this is the thing about very good state schools as well, because often people are paying far more for their house prices as well. I have a friend who went to a very good school in Buckinghamshire, and the house prices were crazy because they knew that was the catchment area for that very, very good state school.
Exactly that.
Okay, well, let me put those points, Mike, to our panel. Just a quick reaction from Matthew Hulbert, Liberal Democrat activist.
Well, I'd like to ask Mike, actually, a question.
He's still on the line.
Which is, does he not, I hear what he says, but does he not think that we should have a situation where all state schools are good enough that we shouldn't need the private sector? As a point of principle, does he agree with me on that?
What do you think, Mike?
I think yes, but I don't think that's ever likely to happen.
Well, it won't if we don't try. Will it, Mike?
The thing was, if that was a situation, why would, if state schools were that good, why would parents think, well, that's good, that's great, we can save the money and send them to that good state
But isn't the point that at the moment all too many state schools sadly aren't that good? I'd say because of 14 years of mismanagement from the Conservatives more than any other reason. But whatever the reason may be,
there's a similar number of people went to private schools under Labour government as well as the Conservative government. I mean, the education sector is a whole other thing. But Mike, just a final word for you on this in terms of Matthew's points there.
I think the rot started years ago when they brought this comprehensive plan in. As somebody once said,
that was Shirley Williams.
It ensures that all children are educated equally badly.
Okay, Mike, thanks for that. Quick word from Jack on this. Clearly something that a lot of people want to talk about.
Yeah, well, I think Mike's right about it being the politics of envy. It is attacking people who scrimp and save to send their kids to private school. And I think, it's all well and good saying, oh, we'd like everyone to have a great standard of education in the state system, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I think actually if you stop private schools from existing, or you kind of tax them out of existence and you bring people back into the state sector, you're just going to have that inequality in the state sector instead, because you're going to have state schools in wealthier areas where parents are able to, you know, give them loads of money and fund loads of after school clubs and all that type of thing, are going to have much better outcomes than the state schools.
And that's
in
a fair
poorer
point,
areas.
Matthew, isn't it?
Well, can I just make one final point on this, which is that I'm really pleased to see, and quite actually shocked and surprised pleasantly, to see Labour putting forward a policy that is actually radical. I'm sure that it will probably be withdrawn within a few days, because Labour and radical are not two words that are allowed to go together any longer.
I will talk to James Murray about that later on, but certainly he has said that Labour have said consistently this is what they're doing, and it will raise, they say billions, the Institute for Fiscal Studies says about 1.6 billion, but we will see. Leslie says the only parents who will lose out on private education are the working class, who make sacrifices for the very ones who Labour purport to be for. It won't affect the rich. Louise says, I think this is just envy politics and throwing a bit of red meat to the socialists. I helped to pay for my grandson to go to private school. He has a bursary. On this issue of votes at 16 as well, this person says, Peter, voting for 16-year-olds, Alex Salmond brought it in Scotland in 2014 because he thought it would win him the referendum, and yet the SNP goes softly on prosecution for under 25s because they say the brain does not fully develop until then. Pat says, love your show. Thank you, Pat. I will be voting Conservative as the least worst party. The thought of Keir Starmer and his other MPs running this country terrifies me. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and his leftist credentials will be there for all to see. As for voting at 16, this is a farce, and we know why they want to bring it in. Suddenly teenagers will be able to change their gender because they are now adult enough to vote. Please God, do not let a Labour government win, says Pat. Well, Jeff in Wakefield has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Jeff, you're not on just with me, but also with Matthew Hulbert, Lib Dem activist, and Jack Rowlett, political commentator. What point would you like to make? You're very welcome.
Yeah, morning, Peter.
Morning.
Yeah, the fact is, if 16-year-olds all voted Conservative, Conservatives would have allowed them to vote years ago.
Okay, you agree with that, Matthew Hulbert? I absolutely agree with that. I think the reason why the Conservatives have brought in things like you need your ID to vote, etc., is because they believe that the people who would have most issue with being able to do... Peter,
not true. That's not true.
Peter, come on, let me get my sentence out.
Okay.
That they think that those people, some ethnic minorities and others, are more likely to vote for centre-left, left-wing parties.
Matthew, sorry.
You don't think that's the reason why they
No,
did that?
I don't. No, I don't.
do.
I think because there's vast electoral fraud in this country. Are you honestly telling me that the Conservative Party doesn't want ethnic minority people to vote in this country?
I think that the reason they bring things like that in is for a political reason.
So the Conservative Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who's a Hindu, the Conservative Home Secretary, James Cleverly, who's black, and all the other ethnic minorities in the cabinet, the most diverse cabinet we've ever had, and you still think the Conservative Party are racist?
I don't think... Now, Peter...
You're saying you don't want ethnic minorities to vote?
I think they think that they're more likely to vote for centre-left parties. That's different, isn't it?
I mean, I suppose it is a bit different, but still, I just think it's a nonsense. Jack, what do you think?
Well, I think, actually, I mean, on the voter ID topic, I think it is a method of voter suppression from the Tories.
In what way?
What
is wrong with showing ID? We show ID for everything.
I love disagreement.
If you want to join a video, I was going to say hire a video. Nobody hires a video anymore. If you want to do basically anything in our society, you've got to show ID. Why should you not do it to vote?
And in a society where everybody has a free form of ID and that is given to everyone, I think you can maybe make that case. But the UK isn't such a society. And actually, if you look at the types, look at the types of ID that you can use to vote, you can use an old person's bus pass to vote, but you can't use the exact same card.
Why is that? Come on.
You should be allowed to. Certainly, veterans cards as well haven't been used.
And the very reason they didn't introduce the veterans cards because they didn't want to introduce student cards.
Because they know older people vote. It's entirely political.
No,
Peter.
It's not. I come from a part of the world where lots of people voted who didn't exist, who were so old they were dead. That's what happened in Northern Ireland on many occasions, and I find it bizarre that up until a few years ago, you could. In fact, was it last year? I could walk into a voting station and say, my name is Matthew Hulbert, give me a vote. My name is Jack Rowlett, give me a vote. And nobody checked a single thing. anything at all. They didn't check my address, they didn't check my name, they didn't check photo ID, nothing. There is bound to be far more voter fraud than people think there is, Jack.
But when I went to vote at the local elections a couple of weeks ago, I gave them my ID, and they didn't even look at me to check that the person on the ID was the same as the person who was voting. They just used it to find out my address and check it off more easily. So I think it's absolutely absurd. I think if you look at the amount of voter fraud that actually takes place in this country,
well,
it's very, very minimal.
It's not minute. I mean, how do we know? I think it'll be very, very interesting to compare how many people voted before May 2023 when this came in, and how many people vote now. But listen, we're going to leave that argument for now. Jeff, thanks for your call. Appreciate Jeff in Wakefield there. We're going to go to a break now, and afterwards we're going to talk, well, whatever you want to talk about as well. But I also want to talk about whether working from home full-time raises the risk of being fat and depressed. Now, we heard from Jeff on schools. We heard from Stephen in Manchester as well. If you want to get your voice on the air, let us know what you think. 0344 499 1000, the only number you need to contact me here on Talk. Thank you to Angela on Twitter, who says Michael Gove and his office have helped a lot with a lot of local issues. Big boots to fill here in Surrey Heath. She says she's a non-Tory voter. The voice notes have been coming in as well. This is kind of a newish thing we're doing. Mike Graham does a lot of them as well, where you can send me a WhatsApp, you send a little voice note, and then we play it out in the air. We're going to do that right now with Matt from Hove. This is what he had to say.
Morning, Peter. So with Sunak having a day off today, presumably he's going to be at Wembley tomorrow watching his beloved Southampton and pretending he understands how football works. Is there any truth in the rumour that he might be about to give up?
I don't think he's going to give up. I think he'll be right through. He'll fight in this election. It would be, it would be pretty much impossible for him to give up in any way. I think he'll probably win his seat. He's quite secure in that seat, but we'll see. And certainly Southampton and Leeds tomorrow, I would be astonished if Rishi Sunak is not at that match in Wembley. He was today taking a day off from campaigning, but I think he was at a veterans event this morning in his constituency. We're told he's going to be in London later, and I'd be astonished if he's not at the Southampton match tomorrow, but we will see. But yeah, I think he'll stay on, and then look, if the Labour win, he's almost certainly got to resign very quickly after that, and we'll see what happens to him after that. Perhaps California will come calling. Julie in Stockton-on-Tees has a voice note as well. This is what she has to say.
Hi Peter, I'm politically homeless. How can the Conservative Party convince me that I can trust them to vote for? Julie from Stockton-on-Tees.
Julie, thanks. We'll try to answer that question with a number of Conservatives that we speak to over the course of today, tomorrow, and actually on Drive as well. I'm here between 4 and 7. The Conservatives, clearly with you, as someone who's politically homeless, have a big job of convincing to do. Let's hear the final one. This is on 16-year-olds voting. This is really getting you going today. Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. And as I say, you can ring us on the air, come on the air and talk to me and have a live conversation. Or you can send me a text on that number as well through WhatsApp, a WhatsApp text, or you can send me a voice note. So let's hear just one more. This is Tony here.
I don't think we should worry about 16-year-olds voting. Unless they can do it online, they won't bother. I mean, they can't even go to McDonald's, can they? They have to do everything online. So I don't think they'll bother.
A lot of older people don't vote as well. There have been lots of low turnouts in local elections, especially for police and crime commissioners as well. Yeah, we'll park that issue just for the moment, because we do have the thoughts of maybe Jack and Matthew have some thoughts on those 3 voice notes. What do you think, Jack? Anything you want to respond to?
Well, I mean, I think that's an outrageous slur on 16-year-olds that they need to do everything online and they wouldn't bother. I don't think, as much as I'm against giving votes to 16-year-olds, I don't think, X group wouldn't vote, therefore we shouldn't give the vote to them is a good reason to withhold the vote from them. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And I think the reason not to give them the vote is just the simplicity of you have to have an arbitrary point where you say you're an adult, you have the responsibility, and 18 seems as good a point as any.
So I probably broke electoral law as a child, I went into the voting booth with my parents, and I was so excited about the whole voting process that they let me fill out their ballot paper. It was still the person they were and the people they were going to vote for, but basically it got to a stage when I was about 12 or 13, I used to go in with them and fill out the ballot paper, and that's probably breaking the law. But I was so excited to vote, and the first time I voted was amazing. But that's just me as a political nerd. Matthew, as one political nerd to another,
well, indeed.
What do you make of those voice notes? Anything you want to respond to?
Well, I'm just loving the consensus here between me and Jack. It was totally unexpected, but you sound as if you are convincible on votes at 16.
I think there are a lot of 16-year-olds who have the knowledge and the commitment to vote, but I think there are also a lot that aren't, and you can also say that about the over 18s as well. So I think we often hear the argument of, 16-year-olds are so engaged, and that's the reason to give them a vote. But I just think you can make that argument about any age group, and then what's to say you don't lower it to 15, say, or 14 after that? Like, you have to have a cut-off point at a certain point.
You do. Can I also ask Peter, where is Rishi? I mean, where the heck is he? Have you ever heard of a Prime Minister on day, what is it, three or four of an election campaign, in effect, I know you may say, but it's something in his constituency, okay, but in effect, taking the day off campaigning. I've never heard anything like it.
I want to read you a tweet. I'm just looking up my phone here from Ruth Davidson. A viewer actually sent this to me earlier. My DMs are open for good or for ill. Sometimes I get nice ones, sometimes I get horrible ones. And Ruth Davidson, who is, of course, the former leader of the Conservatives in Scotland, now a member of the House of Lords, says, the deluge launch drowned out by D-Ream. A brewery visit with a teetotal Prime Minister, so no chance of a drink. She hasn't written drink, she's written something else I'm not going to read out in there. Now a site visit to something famous for sinking in the Titanic quarter. Is there a double agent in Conservative Party HQ, and were they a headline writer in a previous life? Our candidates deserve better. I think you and Ruth Davidson maybe as one, Matthew Hulbert.
Well, indeed. I've always thought that Ruth Davidson is probably a Tory that could also be in the Lib Dems, so who knows? Maybe she might move
Jack,
over.
what do you make of what Ruth Davidson said? Because, I mean, it is pretty astonishing that it has not been a good, visually anyway. I saw him, there was another picture, he was on a plane, I think perhaps coming back from his 2-hour visit.
Exit sign.
To Northern Ireland, a 2-hour visit with an exit sign.
Well, we're missing out, of course, him asking Welsh voters if they're looking forward to the Euros this summer, despite Wales not qualifying, and Rishi Sunak's head being right in the middle of the Morrison sign and spelling out the word moron as well. So there is clearly someone on his campaign team who hates his guts.
It's so the thick of it, isn't it? It's like
absolutely.
the thick of it in real life.
Absolutely.
So I have a little bit of sympathy for Rishi Sunak on the old football thing, because this week I've been presenting Drive in for Jeremy Kyle. I'm also here Monday to Thursday, and we've got to do sport every day, and I know so little about sport that I'm sort of busking it, I think would be a fair way to say it. A few people have been in touch. I also know it's the FA Cup final today. Isn't that good? Isn't that amazing?
Well,
yes, Manchester.
I went past Wembley on the train today.
Oh, right.
I was standing on the train because the Tories can't get the trains right, so I was stood the whole way because of how packed it was. But yes, I did see Wembley as I went by.
Okay, well, full coverage on TalkSport. Learned that as well. Vincent says, is it not written in our constitution that you have to have a referendum to lower the voting age to 16? Labour thinks they can wave it through. Well, we don't have a written constitution. It may well be in the law, but I think it would take some, I don't know, if it would be a referendum or not. I'm not sure whether they could do it or not. One person says, the reason an old person's bus pass is valid as voter ID, but a young person's is not, is because you need to prove who you are in the first place for an OAP ID, but not for the other. This is a well-known, previously discussed fact. Jack, you want to say something?
I'm pretty sure you need to prove who you are for a young person's bus pass as well, because I had to when I had to get one.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that's quite right.
Phil says if children are mature enough to vote at 16, then they're mature enough to go to an adult prison. No more young offenders for them. And my granddaughter goes to a private school. The private school issue is coming up again. Parents were in the military. They saved my grandson in a regular school and doesn't even have a classroom. School is being patched up for 25 years, says Shirley in Newcastle. We're going to talk about reform next, actually, and Dorothy from East Kilbride says it's no surprise that reform did not do so well in the London mayoral vote. With the number of people born in other countries now living in London, it is clear they will not back reform's policies. I'm deeply worried for the future of this country, especially the Jewish population. When Labour get in, it is crazy. Allowing 16-year-olds to vote, says Dorothy. Thank you to my panel of Matthew Hulbert, who is a Lib Dem activist, and Jack Rowlett, who's a political commentator. Thank you for coming in to the studio. Great to see you